Well, joining the tributes being paid over the last few days to Advocate George Bizos, a particularly moving tribute in the last 24 hours from someone who was encouraged by George Bizos to move into law, to become an advocate himself. We continue to see Bizos playing an important and long-term role, in fact, within his own family and with his children. The person who's paid this tribute is Advocate Mahlodi Muofhe. Advocate Muofhe is currently the head of the domestic wing of the State Security Agency. Mr. Muofhe, good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for coming in this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Stephen.
I would like to start by just saying how you write in your tribute that George Bizos played an important role when you were actually an activist. You were one of the people, in the 1970s, the 1980s. If someone was on the run from the security police, he was the person on whose door you could knock.
Yes, indeed, Stephen. Uncle George, as that I wanted me to call him all the time, I and many of my ilk that time, student activists from Soweto in particular, we got to meet him when we were in trouble with the security apparatus of that era, which thought that we were terrorists when we were fighting for a just cause, dismantlement of apartheid and, having to learn content subjects in Afrikaans. So they saw terrorists even though we were very young. So I was maybe fortunate that even from that early age, we would have him as someone we felt very much safe. And even more luckier, I then got to work for a firm of attorneys which did most of this political trials even then, Shan Chetty and company. He has passed on, he's long passed on, attorney Shan Chetty. And that's where I was exposed to. There were very few human rights lawyers at that time, because to be a human rights lawyer at that time meant you can easily find yourself also behind bars for no any other reason. So Uncle George and others, David Sogot, Sidney Kentridge, there were very few really who took political cases. And so I was fortunate that throughout my journey, now and then would get to bump against each other, and was very keen to know what we were doing. I think many people were keen to know what sort of youth this 76 brigade was. So even as we got into adulthood, we interacted, and then at the time when my kids had to go to school, he generally, interestingly enough, said they have got to go to Saheti. And it's a school he founded. I, in fact, asked him, why did he want them to go to that school? And he was interested in showing that both black and white must live together. And the belief was, at that tender age, kids know no color. And I can say today that even with my own kids who are now adults, they have their own families now, the friends they had at Saheti are still their friends even now, in adulthood. So their children even go to that school. The other question that I asked Uncle George at some point, but why did you deem it appropriate to set up a Greek school? The answer was very interesting, that, he used to call me son. You know what, son? We Greek people, especially Portuguese people in South Africa, we run corner shops, fruit and veg and all sorts of things. And I think he felt that there should be a school for them so that their children must be educated. And indeed, many Greek authorities now in different fields, medicine, accounting, law, went through that school, Saheti school.
So he wasn't just actually doing the law and the politics, he was actually doing the society at the same time.
Yes, and in him, and others, of course, as I said, Sydney Kentridge and the like, you know, in all fairness, they didn't do it for money. Because even that time, sometimes you'd have to run a political trial for 2, 3, 4 years without even getting cover, because there was just no money sometimes, you know. So, and Uncle George of that time is the Uncle George who has rested today. And to be honest, even if a lifestyle audit was to be done on him, I think the outcome would be a human rights lawyer who basically understood what poverty meant. He grew up under difficult circumstances, and I think his concern up until his last breath, even if I may say so, is that those who are working to serve communities, citizens, must do so from their heart, and must do so not having an agenda of lining their pockets. And this, for many, many years, has been his concern. And with my kids having gone through their grandkids there, every year, towards the end of the year, Saheti school would have, you know, these celebrations of kids and all sorts of things. Uncle George would not miss an event up until now, as his health, you know, has been failing. But throughout the years that I've been going to Saheti for my kids and now even the grandkids, Uncle George would not miss anything. And I'm sure Saheti learners who would go there only to be told about the founder of Saheti would really miss, and would have missed a lot. He was such a people's person across the color lines.
You write in your written tribute to him that he was very worried about corruption, that he spoke about it a lot.
He did. He did. Even the last time, in fact, whenever I met him, even at Saheti, we would not part ways without him asking me as to, but how are we going to get rid of corruption? He would know, we would not part ways without him not asking that question. And I'll always say, Uncle George, I'm sure systems are in place. At some point, we should be able to get to a point where we say we have managed to get rid of corruption, if not in its entirety, because it may not be possible. But I think there are signs now showing that those who wrong the states know that they may end up having to wear orange overalls. The criminal justice system takes so long the wheels take so long to turn. And I'll tell you that many of us are sometimes impatient, but the reality is that citizens, I'm sure, they can see things in the media, people getting arrested, all sorts of things. They can see in the media people losing appeals, having to subject themselves to going to wear orange overalls at some point. But I think Uncle George would be much, much more happier, even in his final sleep, if we were to get rid of corruption in its entirety.
Mr. Muofhe, I know you want to pay tribute to Advocate Bizos, but I do need to ask you about your other position as the domestic head of the State Security Agency. It's not very often that we're able to invite you into our studio. And the State Security Minister, Ayanda Dlodlo, she told me here on Newsfeed about 2 months ago that when it came to recording information, recording people's cell phone conversations at the State Security Agency, everything was being done under the law, that there was no departure from the regulations around tapping phones and eavesdropping on people. And there has been, in the past, a dispute between yourself and her on this. Are you able to confirm that the laws are now being properly followed by the State Security Agency in the part that you're in charge of?
Well, since taking my position at the agency, laws have been followed to the letter. And there is no intention to deviate from operating without law. All of us, we are committed to working within the law. Remember that our Constitution is the supreme law of the country, and it states that all of us are equal before the law, and all of us are subject to the rule of law. Unlike in the past, when some of us were subjected to diabolic apartheid laws where we could just be detained incommunicado, and the security systems doing as they wished with us, to a point where some of our heroes, leaders, perished in their hands, and with no any judicial recourse. In this instance, we are all working within the law, and indeed, my minister was correct when you interviewed her that things are done within the law.
And your relationship with her and Robert McBride, who now heads the foreign arm, everything okay?
I'm not too sure where this notion comes all the time. I'm sure that's also one of the things. I knew that this question would come, and maybe I have to come so that I can put it to bed. Minister has been saying at all times in the interviews that the relationship with us who report to her is a perfect one. And my relationship with Minister Dlodlo in particular, it's a professional relationship, and we work very well together. And that's what the agency requires. Otherwise, if there is some disjuncture, at that level, the agency would not function. We are working very hard to try and ensure that the things which were highlighted in the reports authored by Dr. Mufamadi, which our president adopted in toto, is implemented. So we are on course to basically use that report as our Bible.
Advocate Mahlodi Muofhe, I really appreciate the time. I appreciate the fact that you did answer my very rude questions. Thank you, sir. Advocate Mahlodi paying his own tribute there to Advocate George Bizos, and of course is the domestic head of the State Security Agency.